Hi, Annie.
Hello.
So glad you're here.
Yeah,
Um, so glad to be doing this interview and dive into the Emerging Showgirl Awakening deck with a special. Today, we get to really dive into sensitivity. Yes, world, world that is with us either through seeing or seeing and hearing us. I am so happy to introduce you to Annie Axford, who is a therapist who specializes in sensory sensitivity and has developed a process of strengthening sensitivity that she calls sensitive leadership. Discovering this work has changed my life. And Annie, your fingerprints are all over this deck. Just fingerprint, fingerprint, fingerprint. Yeah.
awesome.
Yep. And I do want to say I'm so excited that you have in the world, you've birthed a tiny book of sensitive leadership, which if you're enjoying what we talk about here, do look it up on Amazon. It's an ebook.
And
It's a
it's actually the
title, right?
little, the
The
little.
little, excuse me, I substituted little for time. The little book of
Yep.
sensitive leadership. Beautiful. And also, for those of you who are Instagram friendly, Annie has generously shared um, little micro practical teachings about sensitive leadership, actually things you can do, not just read about and go, oh, that's interesting, but actually practice it, because that's where Showgirl Awakening and sensitive leadership really jive in the felt sense, the felt sense of being a human. Um, Coming down, we'll be talking, coming down from the beautiful above view that so many of us, because I do include myself in. Um, I haven't laid the context, and I haven't invited you to yet. I want to briefly show you the deck first, just laid out on a sheet before we dive in.
Cool.
All right, here comes. Here. Can you see it?
Yep.
Oh, beautiful. Okay. So today, I'll just briefly show you. These are some suits. This is the movement suit at the top with the little teal fan, and the archetype suit with the purple fan. It's color coded because you can divide them into sections and just play with one section or cross sections. And
Nice.
thank you. Yeah. I can't wait to touch them one day.
That's beautiful.
Thank you. This is the reveling in your body suit, one pillar of the work, the revealing your radiant essence suit, and the receiving what you desire suit. And sensitivity is right here in the reveling in your body suit. And I think today we're also going to look over here, this fiery suit over here, which is the frames. I'll make it a tiny bit bigger so you can see. Kind of small. It's literally, these are frames as in putting on a pair of glasses, like a new frame, a new way of seeing. Any of these, and we're going to look, I'm pretty sure, at immanence versus transcendence, this frame, and creating versus fixing. But I'm open to it shifting a little bit. That's my thought. Yay. And that's the back. That's the back of the card.
They're really beautifully designed and they look very interesting. I'm intrigued in all of how it all comes together.
Yay. Well, here we're going to mostly do high focus rather. This was just a brief meta view, and now we're just going to dive into here we go. There we go. Jump us back. Yay. So how did I first find you, Annie? I'm thinking back. Online, in the previous incarnation of your web presence, yeah, which is now sensitive leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And when I read, I had to take it in small doses because reading each paragraph of the paragraphs I read there, I think this might have been 2012 or 2011, right around I
That sounds about right. Yeah.
right around there. Um, my own in the last interview, rapport with self, rapport was a word, and my rapport with my own self, my um, rose so much through reading what you had to say about sensitivity. Would you describe, does this feel like a good starting point, highlight HSP, just what that is?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so my work draws from a few different sources, and some of the primary sources are Dr. Elaine Aron, studies the genetic trait of sensory sensitivity, and she is the one who coined the term highly sensitive person, or HSP,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of the quick, short hashtag version.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and she wrote a number of books about highly sensitive people and thriving when you feel overwhelmed in the world with your sensitivity. And she defines a highly sensitive person from her research as someone who, and you can think about it as what a highly sensitive person does, DOES. They have a greater depth of processing, so things go in a really deep way, greater likelihood to be overstimulated by sensory information. And the E is for emotional sensitivity, tuning in a lot to one's own emotions as well as those of others. And sometimes I think that term empath a lot of times applies here. We can get into nitty gritty, but
And no,
I,
also,
I wouldn't say, yeah, anyway, I think there's some crossover there.
yeah.
And then the S is for sensory sensitivity to lighting, sound, textures, digestion, all of the senses that can be really deeply affected, picking up on things in a more amplified way. And so her work about this trait, and there is a self-assessment at hsperson.com if people are interested, and her books I think can be really informative. Her work was sort of the capstone to a lot of other understanding that I was having already about sensitivity, and sort of my interest related to understanding my own body
Mm-hmm.
and how to work with myself energetically and physically, and understand how to understand myself. And there's also a theory that is called the orchid hypothesis, that there are children who are born more like orchids rather than dandelions. And so that's also where some of my language comes from. And I saw it with your card of
Yeah.
sensitive being as a trait being different than being hardy as a trait.
Yes.
And
Yes. One of the frame cards, sensitive versus hardy. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that's helpful to understand as a theory, that there are all kinds of different types of research showing that some babies at birth are born more sensitive. So it's
Mm-hmm.
different than trauma, it's different than a disorder, it's different than a lot of other aspects of sensitivity that can show up, different than autism, in that it is this way of being in the world that means you have this greater likelihood to pause, to feel a lot, to kind of be slow to warm up, to take information in a certain way with your nervous system. And then from there, and what interests me in my work and what I focus on is really how to work with this sensitivity physically. And I come from a background of human development, and a lot of theories of human development, in my opinion, are for hardy people. They're for people who have a nature or genetic disposition to be hardy, like a dandelion, which just means a little bit more of a robust constitution and nature. It doesn't mean that hardy people are not sensitive.
Right.
And I think that's a tricky dynamic of saying, oh, I'm sensitive or highly sensitive. It doesn't mean that other people are not sensitive. And
I find
I've,
myself saying that, quoting you very specifically when I introduce it. It doesn't mean they're not. That's why I really appreciate that word hardy. It feels
mhm.
not um, not judging. But
Yeah, and I think it's really helpful to look at it in terms of nature, because there's nothing wrong with dandelions and there's nothing wrong with orchids. They're just different. They're very different in how they function and their needs and all kinds of things. And it can be easy to get into comparison. And I think especially when you can see so many dandelions around you, um, and that's sort of what's presented or what you may take in as the ideal of being a person and how to function, that it can be really, I mean, it can lead to a lot of illness, first of all, and a lot of frustration just trying to figure out how to live. So the point of my work is not to say who's better or worse, or but more just to say, here's how to live as an orchid. Here is how you lead with your sensitivity. Here's how you lead your own life. You're not a dandelion, and that's great. And a lot of research and literature, I think, is focused on that. And I found that especially in theories of human development. And I draw specifically from the theory of Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
yeah, yeah,
And and this is in the little book of sensitive leadership, talking a little bit more about the what I call the whole archy of needs for highly sensitive people, where we're starting more from the top and moving down into the physiological rather than starting at the physiological and moving into the transcendent needs. And so um, I guess in summary, all of my work is really based on those ideas, and that's kind of how I define sensitivity and understanding how people with different, this more sensitive nature, um, how they are impacted socially, culturally within a broader system, and individually within the body system, and how to work with all of that so you can actually live your life in a meaningful way. And so that, I think that's kind of a good overview of what I mean when I say sensitivity and highly sensitive.
yes. I'm literally seeing almost like a little bubble that starts from you, almost like a quote bubble. That's the little triangle part that goes towards the person who just said it, and then a big bubble. And I love that. Thank you for that whole overview. I actually want to pause because sensitivity for you cannot be contained in one card. It's not. It is the container of all your pieces, or I don't know. That's the best model, but um, I will. Yeah, I'm actually going to. I'm just gonna. I want to come. I'm intrigued to come into the when you touched on the Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I can't remember if you said directly that you have turned it upside down uh,
Mm-hmm.
from how he created it. I find it interesting. In some research I did, his early triangle didn't have the upper levels. Even it was, I think, just three. Yeah, it was the bottom, the physical safety and food and shelter. I can't remember the second one, and then the love and belonging. And I think that first model he stopped there.
Yeah,
That
the earlier models have five usually, just which I do
okay?
think is very significant, because
Yeah.
especially it's only the top three that were added later, which is the very top is transcendence, and then self-actualization, and then aesthetic, which I think that is incredibly significant socially, because that is where highly sensitive people default to. That is the whole, and that's, I would say, if we're going to talk sort of like at a lot of levels, because you can also line this up, I think, with chakras or with energy and just how we function in a lot of
And
ways.
you have, yeah, I've just
Yeah.
beautifully, yeah.
those top 3 levels are the ones that are more what I would say disembodied or imaginal, or, they're transcendent, they're outside of the body. And so I think that the first theory only talked about these first 5 needs that were in the body. Was It's part of that like mind body separation, and that I think makes it really tricky for highly sensitive bodies when like their default mode of operating is not even identified in our like
Not on
theory.
the map. Not on the map.
Yeah,
So
not
how,
even there.
how to find a mirror there? No, no, no mirror at all. Um,
Right.
this, there's one word I don't think you use it much, but with your meaning, I think you're referring to what I mean when I say there's. I don't know where I first heard immanence, but I was looking for the opposite of transcendence,
Mm.
and uh, knowing I've known in a felt sense way and with my own cobbled together language for a very long time that I was not wanting to. I wanted to have I wanted to enhance and feel more like a spirit in a body, but I knew for me that didn't mean reaching up. It did,
Right.
it did not mean reaching up, and most spiritual traditions refer everything is about the ascent and the I mean, if you get into the mystics, that you can find some other the mystical traditions. Some
Mhm.
can refer to body and felt sense more, but it's mostly of not mostly of transcending the body, finding ways to. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, the direct opposite of listening, and actually, for a really short way, the sensitivity card for me is what's my own data, what's my information, what am I sensing,
Mhm.
and that's what I need as a highly sensitive person. I need to know I'm becoming more and more of myself thanks to you and other many other people that I'm interviewing in this series and other wonderful people, and um, just my own will to arrive in this body. um, Lost my train just a little bit. If you followed this series, you know it's a fine place to be. But yeah, the felt sense, the coming down into the body. What is my information? I knew that for me to thrive and feel, have the experience of being a singular human who is also connected to many others, um, I had to. I had to get more here, and that journey. This is my long way of to say that's the imminent journey of spirit, whatever you want to call spirit. I'm talking about it outside of any particular dogma. The greater than my body, my knowing, my outside of body sensing.
Mhm.
I'm not satisfied with any of those terms, but to come in and that imminent. That's why it's important enough for me to give a whole card to of
Mhm.
the coming into the body. And I want to pass the potato back to you because you were there with the pyramid, but
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that immanence is an interesting way to think about it, because I do um, I think I work with a lot of words that I think can be a little tricky to understand sometimes. And the word, the very bottom of that pyramid that is sort of the end result is the physiological. Those are the
yeah,
physiological needs, which I think has some relevance to immanence. But I think part of the trickiness of all of this is saying, what is the body, and where does it end and where does it begin? And I think the word transcendence to me is really interesting because it's outside of the body, it's transcending the body, but the way we transcend the body is through our nervous system, which is the body.
right.
So it all is connected. There's no way to be transcendent without a body. And
There's no way to be for us without a body.
right, right. And so I think all of that is very connected. And so at every level, it's all it all goes together in a way. You can't kind of have one without the other. And I think thinking about it as a process, for me anyway, is helpful of
Mhm.
understanding it sort of like steps on a ladder, or however you want to look at that, that is helping you like refine and sort of materialize down into one specific point. And I think that is what you're speaking to with immanence.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say that it is a process. Yeah. And I think that is, I think there's a little bent to it. I mean, even that word, when I looked more into that word, I might have first found it just through a thesaurus. I mean, or what's when it's the antonym of
Hmm.
of transcendence. And when I've looked more, I think it's a word that's actually mostly used in religion. I think
Hmm.
that's where it's been tossed around the most. And I would say that there is, for me, the aspect of um, spirit in a body, and I mean that. Um,
Hmm.
but I'm still more interested in the specific. Like, for example, I don't anything too trancy doesn't. I want to feel like I am here. Like I can locate myself. That makes me
Hmm.
um, relax. Not because I don't have access to the place of. I have lots of access, and I go there default often, where I'm sourcing information reflexively, automatically from my environment and the people around, not even the people just in the room with me, but the people I'm connected to who are many cities and states or countries away. And that's actually a skill that is worth developing for someone who has lived in a more hardy, discreet place. It's just, I have that. And folks I know who have similar makeup, they have that. And the gym is the exercises and the practices that feel the most nourishing are the, oh my gosh, where's my edge?
Hmm.
Literally, my yeses and my nos, and my yes, that, but a little more of this and a little less of that. The actually bringing it in, I don't know that I've thought about it this way, in a quantifying way is
Hmm.
helpful, because I can go outside of quantif just into the, oh yes, this is loosely like that. I can find these threads of connection that are very loose, but there's a connection.
Sure.
But I'm thinking of, for the pyramid turning upside down. I don't know. I don't know. Do you feel like there's anything more about that in that, without going miles? Because I know that's the thing.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Um,
Maybe not.
I think the present with, I do think that we struggle culturally with that separation. And to me, what's significant,
Yeah.
I think, in the spiritual world, in religion, in the art world, in
Hmm.
business, there are a lot of different ways that we create pedestals or separation.
Mm.
And I think, and it is part of how we look at uh, access, success. There's I think a lot of times this striving that comes from that separation. And I think for me, understanding this pyramid going the other direction is to really see that this is all us. Like, we're all connected in this. There's not I, I think socially we have this sense of wanting to dissociate, um, and calling that spiritual or successful.
Oh, fire. Okay. Yes. Yes. Right. Right.
And I think that's part of what this model shows is no, the transcendent isn't dissociation. Those are different things. And to be worshiping something, um, I think it's something we all do, but that part of that is to take it down off of the altar, take it down off of the pedestal you've put it on, and realize it's all you, it's all us, it's all like there's not a separate place or a separate thing. And when we separate that in ourselves, it does become dissociation and it becomes harmful. And I think
It creates illness.
yes,
We
and
talk about, yeah. Yeah.
I think a lot of highly sensitive people do experience illness for lots of different reasons, and that's one of them. And part of that illness comes from the body system and personal beliefs, but also this larger cultural system and idea and ideals we have about power and leadership and governance and medicine, and like all of these ways in which we create that separation. And so I think that's one of the, personally to me, one of the most significant and useful parts of this model and how I work with it and understand it is to be able to see that everything is a relationship and everything is connected to me. There's no, like, if I'm feeling that there is something that's not
Yeah.
me or that's other in that way, that's probably me dissociating. And we all do it, you know, we
Yeah.
all do.
Yeah.
And but that's still, it's, I think it's more useful socially and personally to see that as dissociation and work with it that way rather than as a goal to be able to be
Right.
dissociated.
Right. Oh, I'm really expert at, yeah, because I think it is a cultural goal, has been for a long time. You've touched on another card, of course, systemic versus singular, which is just that
Yeah.
we are not outside of relationship, and
Hmm.
that is a major um metaphor, or no, not metaphor, what's that, what's the lone ranger or the lone someone,
Archetype.
archetype. Yeah, yeah, it's a,
Yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
yeah. but but ironically, it's the, I find it's the discerning my loneness that helps me feel in a non connected to everything without constantly dissociating. It's,
Yeah.
I'm here, and that I think is specifically a salient journey for someone who has higher sensitivity. That one, and it's a different one. It's meaningful to me to somehow to say the 80% 20%, or the
Yeah.
85-15, that what's been through research, and this is not just for humans but animals
Hmm.
too, that the ratio is 15 to 20% are genetically highly sensitive, and 80 to 85 hardy. So that, 2
Yep.
10
Yeah. I
people,
think that
that,
is sig-.
something like that. That's, yeah. I missed what you said, Annie. What was that?
Yeah, yeah. I failed to mention that earlier, but yes, I think it is important to see that it is this about 20% minority, and that is also significant because I think about highly sensitive people are sort of like the social or cultural nervous system, and that it wouldn't, that ratio is important, that it wouldn't be functional if every single person was highly sensitive.
Oh
And
no. Right. It wouldn't make sense for the whole. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
but that we definitely need a portion of the population to be this social nervous system, and that we do have a role and a sense of belonging socially and culturally that I think also sometimes gets missed. And
Certainly. Certainly.
so I definitely think, but it's, I think it's important. I think you can see that as like, oh, I'm a minority, or there's something. maybe wrong with me, or that
Uh,
kind of sense. But I think for myself and how I view that is, I used to feel frustrated that more things were not sort of geared toward or tailored toward highly sensitive ways of living and operating. And I still get frustrated that there is a sense of being sensitivity being deprioritized. But I also understand that's part of my role, is that, like, I am that nervous system within the more hardy, sort of tangible, physical, dense world. And so rather than just being frustrated that nobody else is sort of managing that for me, to realize that's my job to be that feedback, and to nourish myself and care for myself within that, but not just being frustrated that I don't see that in the world around me, but being that in the world around me. That's part of my role, is that I can provide that feedback and information. And I think sometimes that's also tricky for highly sensitive people in terms of like energy management and burnout. And
yeah.
but but I do think seeing that, like, maybe what's obvious to you with your own sensitivity is not obvious to the person next to you, and that it can be easy to sort of, again, dissociate or remove yourself from the situation and say, oh, why is nobody else talking about these things that I'm curious about or that I want to talk about? Then talk about them. That's part of what your job is, and your role is to see and say those things.
We've landed solidly in the territory of frame card creating versus fixing. Because what you're
Cool.
talking about is this the tension between uh, I don't feel okay here in this social context. What I'm needing to talk about, no one is. So I'm either going to try to fix myself, which won't
Mhm.
work, so
Yeah.
that I don't need, excise the need, never works well, or create by saying the thing aloud, or starting a different group, or writing a
Mhm.
book, or
Mhm.
whatever it is, of literally making something. It's the simplest sense of making something that didn't exist.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that those opportunities, the creative opportunity is seeing and saying, like, here's an opportunity where I could um, adapt and sacrifice myself, be invisible, missed, misunderstood, victimized,
Oh,
and and holding that space to see that also an opportunity to create something, and not doing it again at the cost of oneself, but really in the service of being oneself, and showing up. And I do think I think for me, understanding the ability to assert myself is very different than trying to get other people to validate me. And that
can
asserting
you
my
repeat that? That's so important.
yeah,
The
yeah.
ability, that's a super key. That could be another card if the deck wasn't done. Next time, but yeah. The ability to,
Yeah, I think understanding that the ability to assert yourself is different than seeking external validation. That you are
yeah.
speaking up or saying something not because you're trying to get other people to agree with you, but just because you're just like a nervous system being like, pain, I'm registering pain, I'm just telling you there's pain. Your nervous system doesn't say, like, is it cool if we're in pain right now,
Oh
is
my
that all
God,
right with you?
this is just, this is perfect. Ah,
And that's, I think, really important. And I think, so being able to hold that space and to own one's experience, one's sensitive sensory experience, and assert it, to embody it, to direct it, to share it, rather than seek out or wait for or ask for permission to be feeling or experiencing whatever.
the word you just said, permission, that was a word that was going to go in the deck a couple of years ago. And then I had to I didn't want the deck to go to too many, and then it wanted to have some symmetry. So it got taken out, and it was just going to be a subtext. And then days before the final, I had to submit the final list. It was. I kept seeing permission everywhere, and
Mm.
again and again. It's like, okay. So I did a shakedown, and permission is back in, and it's been coming up inadvertently through interviews and all around, and it's this shift from this is a big one, from asking permission to be, which through me in a very concrete way in my life, it's come through this question: can I ask a question
Mm.
instead of just asking a question?
Right, right.
So the permission was going, I had it tilted in the direction of, I had the gate for coming out and asking a question or doing a dance or wearing whatever it was, and
Mhm.
the other way, it was a very loose and flimsy gate for someone to come and request something of me.
Yeah.
There was the gate was, if you're only hearing, my hand is very limp, I'm showing the limp gate of,
Yeah.
oh, someone wanted something from me. There was no gate, and my reflex was to, because I can, because I have a lot of capacity, and I have a lot of resourcefulness,
Mhm.
and I overestimate what my own nervous system can do, because I am acutely aware of all that is, even though I don't have the nervous system of all that is, but
Right.
I'm aware of it. So I say yes. Historically, this is in an active process of revamping and unlearning for me, but I think this is a typical way of the, I didn't have a permission gate for others to come in, and I had a too solid one, too thick, too many locks for me just to express. Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah.
And I think, and the way that I conceive of that is thinking about operating at the transcendent. Um, in my work, some of the imagery that I use, as you know, is there's circles, and I think you.
Beautiful. Yes, please talk about the deck. Your deck is, yeah,
Thank you.
please. Yeah.
But I think you can think about, like, image wise, I think about the transcendent is the big circle, and then there's a little circle within that, and you can orient from or identify from either place. You can be
Uh-huh.
in, and when you're operating in the transcendent, there's nothing good or bad about it. It's just a place to be in. For highly sensitive people, that's the default, to start there and be there, and they can identify their entire identity with the transcendent. And then it does, everything feels hypothetical. It feels like, oh, hypothetically I can do that. And there is this big capacity and
Yes.
faith and trying to hold things. But then when you're actually operating, taking action steps, behaving, that's in the little circle. You don't behave in the transcendent, you behave in the body. And so to understand the difference between, can I hypothetically do something versus can I actually do something today or tomorrow or this
Yes.
week, and knowing how to orient from that, the transcendent versus the physiological, the transcendent versus the immanent, that
Yes. Yes.
for
I
sure.
I I love what you're saying. It's reminding me of, in very concretely, in the creating of a burlesque solo. The process that I use and teach is first just opening up, literally opening up for an improv. Um, First, just watching other people improv to your song and seeing all these possibilities. You just receiving,
Mm,
oh my gosh, here's the song I've chosen. Before you do the improv, it's important. Everyone else doesn't, just see possibility, possibility,
mm,
not sifting through it all, just having it. And then, second step, you do an improv. And what comes through comes through. And then you have all of these possibilities. Can you make an act with all of the possibilities? Absolutely not. There will be no act.
right.
The only way the act happens is through coming to the smaller circle of, oh, there are 3 minutes in this song, and these different items of clothing are coming off, so we have these events, and then we have these seconds left, and the music we have this melody and we have this rhythm, and it comes to choosing with using our aesthetic. What do I like there? I like
Mhm.
to use to come first before what looks good, what feels good, and finding
Mhm.
that intersection of where the feel is the 85 to 95% of the time is the predominant chooser, and we're finding the place where the feel and the look are they're really happy together. But anyway, it's that choosing. It's the I don't know if this is a completely direct, and I like to look at it almost in the right brain, how diffuse our right brain sees every, not that we can ever divorce our right and left brain, but it's perceiving what is through everything. And then the left brain is saying, you're doing a pirouette in this act and you're not um, doing the splits. I, I'm just picking things, but
Sure.
there's no, and if you try to do all the movements, if you try to do all the things, I'm coming outside of the solo now. If I try to respond to all of the needs, I will actually not be I mean, for me, this sounds too strong, but I will not be a person anymore. I will
Yeah.
be, does that ring true for you? Your face tells me, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. What do we become? What are we at that place when we are over responding, which I think is one of the largest things that my own work and what has called me to is to learn to not respond is actually an okay verb, but maybe not to overreact or over. There's a lot of over manage, over control, over react. And why I'm drawn to you and your work, Annie, is to have concrete models and practices of this. There's no neat verb, but to come to the other side of the polarity from those things I just named, so I can be, just so I can be. Oh, this is reminding of the be do have, and
Mm.
have do be. Do you want to talk about that with the triangle? Or however that, if this sparks you, because I'm just thinking of that.
Mhm. Well, I think that that is also a common sort of comparison, I guess I would say, between hardiness and sensitivity is that idea of like um and I think that can also lead to that kind of spirit of fixing things is if you feel like you have to um have something you don't have in order to um experience your own sense of value or validity or worth or power in the world.
Mhm.
And I think that that part of that and the kind of the trap that can happen is like waiting for things to feel different or be different rather than just embodying exactly where you are. And I think if, especially for a lot of highly sensitive people, where you can be could be incredibly disappointing, and so you don't want to be there, and so there's this continued avoidance and continued transcendent abstraction. And instead of being willing to say like, oh, I'm super disappointed, that's where I am, I'm very disappointed right now, or I'm very sick, or I'm very hurt, or I'm very lonely, or I'm I'm struggling, in the struggle feels a lot of times like the wrong thing to do, but actually, and I think part of the fear of being in struggle is that there is no way to live. There is no way, but from the transcendent, there is no way to live. And that's where I think it gets tricky, because if you're looking only in the transcendent, if you are overreacting, literally, I don't mean that in like a just calm down, you're overreacting kind of a way, because I think that's also not helpful advice. But literally, if you are um, trying to seek a sense of self or control or meaning in your life by reacting to every single thing that comes to you,
Yeah.
then you feel and
Guilty,
identify.
guilty.
then you feel and identify with simply just the information in your environment. So you are not being a person, you are being a warm blanket. You are being,
Yeah, yeah.
because people are specific, people have preferences, people have limits, and they're not these abstractions. We can access the transcendent, we can use that transcendent information, but really understanding that the person who's overreacting is not tuning into their preferences, who's not tuning into their body and their needs, and that body needs that, those limits, and that appropriate, responding from a sense of preference rather than just responding from a sense of urgency.
Oh, what you just said is very much the heart of what Showgirl Awakening is about, even though it might look like something else. That's what you just said. What you said, becoming specific and
Mm-hmm.
choosing to yeah, to be very to one woman actually last year, at the end of doing her first performance of her first solo created in the burlesque from the inside out method, used as language, basically said, i i I now feel like a person.
Mm-hmm.
And that just like, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like, I mean, I think it's
Oh,
great that you embody those actual practices of like, okay, here, yeah, you're accessing the transcendent. That's great. Now there's like this refinement process where you get down to an actual 3 minutes of actual
yeah,
stuff and a lot of decision making and learning how to
lots.
decide, and have your own preferences and learning literally how to direct things to get to a specific
And
experience,
also
which,
what you see and what you don't see, very literally. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And I think it is 100% a practice. There's so much resistance to that. There's so much resistance and desire to stay in the transcendent, but it actually feels really relieving and really good, and you feel like a person when you let yourself, start there, but then move into that more specified place. And I find that the more people do that kind of a practice, the more it can be applied broadly to all kinds of situations. And it is like a muscle. That's why I say it's strengthening sensitivity, because you're strengthening, um, your whole, all of those systems that work together to help you direct what you're picking up on with that sensitivity, rather than just feel like you're being run around by it.
The transferring of that experience, ooh, I had a felt sense of I chose, and I limited the field of what I was responding to. I mean, if we just get very concrete, I'm not responding to the tuba, I'm responding to the piano.
Mhm. Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
in if it's in a choreography, but yeah, and then taking that out from there. The the I just love when something can be boiled down so simply into the be do have, or the have do
Mhm.
be, and um the three pillars that undergird this whole deck have a be slash feel, which is the reveling. And
Mhm.
that's, well, really, if you're fully in your senses, you're, you can locate yourself, not completely satisfied with this language, but if you can locate what your own experience is, you're in it, and you're having it. um you're also at that same moment, you are revealing yourself to yourself, and you also are receiving everything that that being, what I'm saying is you're doing them all at once. If you're fully being, you're also doing and having. But
Mhm.
I certainly experience coming from, I have to get my footing with be and feel. I can't start with the have.
Mhm.
Yeah. Where, and I think that that's a highly sensitive journey of coming from, got to have a sense of what actually I of the I am, the
Mhm.
the more concrete, not the I am of everything, but the I am of me. And
Mhm.
then I can show you. It's kind of like slowing down that process, which I know I just said happens at once. It happens at once, and it
Mhm.
happens sequentially also. And
Mhm.
and then that third stage, I'm actually that third stage of receiving, which is also really meaning having and taking for me in this. It's
Mhm.
that to receive something, you have to reach. It's actually one of the cards you have to reach. And then when the thing is in your hand, whatever it is, you have to savor it. You have to have it, or else you don't have it.
Right.
Even if you take whatever it is, the cake or the money or the new job, you can technically have those things. But it's not just a physical, this is hard to talk about. It's not just, oh, here's my new job. It's like, are you experiencing your new job? Are
Mhm.
you in the job? Are you
Mhm.
relating with the job, or is it a tick off of a to-do list? So that
Mhm.
the reaching and receiving, that's an area that's very alive for me. And I think that this is all emerging. I won't even understand this deck before I die. A lot of it, but it's very much emerging. And
Mhm.
I think that this direction of be, do, have um, is the sensitive. Is that your experience? That's the sense more of a sensitive
Yeah,
path.
definitely.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, and I think it is sometimes people get hung up and they're not able to make any traction because they think they should have before they can be. And so,
Oh, because they see that, because they experience that being someone else's path. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And I think like there are a lot of things, kind of going back to the orchid comparison that I do think are helpful is that like, and there are even phrases we have commonly of like bloom where you're planted. And I find that actually for highly sensitive plants, it is go where you can bloom. And
Mhm.
and I think that there are a lot of ways that we can feel like, oh, I
Mhm.
just comparing, even like, oh, I have it so much better than so many other people. Why am I struggling? Or how do I get that thing so that then I can be this person? Or instead of just being able to understand that the having is the results of being where you are, being exactly as you are, and taking the risk to say that from here I can go where I'd like to go. I'm not
Yeah.
in the wrong place.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Would you say all that again, Annie? Having, or just that line, having is the result of being who and where you are, or about that.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm, mhm.
Hmm. I'm taking notes. I don't do this in every interview. Oh, oh, I can't wait to go through and timestamp this one so people can have a bird's eye, like, oh, talking about that. Ooh, I want more. Annie, this isn't very you can say no, but I think it'd be really fun to to have some interview or some way. I would like to have you share, I mean, what you're sharing on your Instagram, what at sensitive Instagram, sensitive leadership, at sensitive leadership, these, and it's
Sensitive leadership.
at sensitive leadership. um and he's a little bit here and there spoken of, maybe only one of the graphics in the elements of sensitivity cards, one circle inside the other. The Did those get did you go into a trance and download those? How did you how did you do that? I am sure it was a long time on one level, but it may have all spilled out in designs over a weekend. I have no idea. But
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. I had been trying to, I know that I wanted to write a book. And I just wanted, but even more than writing a book, I wanted to have a concise, functional way to share the model of sensitive leadership, because it is linear in a way, but then also these different pieces and parts. And so I had been thinking about cards, and I'd been thinking about like the elements, the periodic table of elements, and just like kind of understanding that like there are these different elements that are sort of lined up, you know, in the periodic table, but they don't, it's not like you can find them mixed and matched in nature in all kinds of different ways, and just understanding the different elements though and their properties. And so I had already been kind of noodling on that, and I actually had little cardstock cards to make your own like game cards, playing cards,
Yeah.
and I also was I like design, and so I was playing around a little bit with some an app actually that had some different shapes, and exploring that and seeing how that made sense in my mind. And it was really um, kind of, I call it like a beautiful mind moment. If you've seen that movie, A Beautiful Mind, where he just has like stuff spread out everywhere and like doing all kinds of math. And I did just have those cards, and I was writing on this one, and it kind of was just like, here's how it all
Oh,
goes together. So
oh, what a
that was,
happy day. What a happy, radically happy day. Beyond. Really, there's some
yeah.
ecstasy in that.
Yeah, it kind of came together in one way over a lot of time. I
Sure.
knew from kind of trying to structure things and get a clear sense of structure. But I mean, it really came through the process of sensitive leadership. Like it was very big and abstract at first, and then I got a little more refined. And then I would say the actual card designs, though, that came together pretty almost immediately.
And the design informs you understanding the relationships. Yes? Yes,
For
yes.
sure.
Um, yeah, I can't tell you how, because the designs are so strong that they don't need the word. I mean, the word helps, of course,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
your design communicates the thing in a nonverbal way, which is so lovely because it's a multilingual deck without translation. I mean, you still need some. I want to show you a very messy sketch. This big circle in the middle is
Nice.
a circular representation of how the cards relate to each other,
Yeah,
which is helping me understand them differently, because I
for
can
sure.
see in a spokesway, oh, that falls between that and that. Oh, wow, that helps me think about
Mhm.
it differently. I love how
Mhm.
we have to, it's like we meet halfway with models.
For
We,
sure.
and yeah, and they're talking, models talk. Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, I wish I could show you. I don't have it with me right now, but I have a huge like notebook that's for like drawing, I think, art, but I use it for just like, and the first time I wrote all of it out, like it's
oh, you
totally
still have it. I'm so glad. Oh, I want to see that. I want to see that one day. And I
yeah.
also would love if I have or create, oh, look at those words, have, create. If I have or create the platform to interview you more about the your cards, or sections of them, or I mean, basically world, and is where it's at. If any of this, yeah, I just so very grateful. um yeah, this almost feels like a good pause place, I think. Do you think?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. um this is worth a re-listen, people. You probably will catch more things if you if you listen again, because this is dense. This is beautifully dense. And yeah, yeah. And do look, um hopefully by the time you hear this, the emerging Showgirl Awakening deck is steps closer to coming out, or maybe it's even out. And Hopefully right below wherever you're hearing or seeing this, there will be access for that, and for there'll be, I'm going to say it again. Annie, will you say that, say, because my brain is full of the concrete, the Instagram link and the what have you to find you. Yeah,
Yeah, Instagram, it is sensitive leadership,
beautiful.
all one word. And the on Amazon, I have the little book of sensitive leadership. That's a good intro into the work and understanding all of that. And then you can also look at sensitiveleadership.com and see the elements of sensitivity, which are my cards that we've been talking about. And I'm also in the process of refining and working with a lot of that and creating a more encompassing book that goes into greater detail with everything.
Well, I can't wait. I'm so glad that you came here, Annie, and helped me understand um, these cards and concepts more. All the cards.
All the
All the
cards.
cards. How many cards are in the elements?
There are, I don't know if I could think of it off the top
Oh,
of my
that's
head.
okay.
There are 8 practice suits, and there are 5 cards in each of those. So there's 40 there.
40.
And then there are some additional cards that I may take out. They've been kind of useful in their own way, but I don't know in terms of like creating a final deck how functional they'll be.
Okay.
But the main there, I have the 8 practices that line up with the um, 8 levels in the process of meeting your needs, 8 chakras, 8, those kind of 8
Yeah.
basic levels like we talked about.
I want to dive in more. All the cards, all the cards. So Annie, stay here. We'll say goodbye after. We're going to say goodbye privately, world. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining us.